thanks for the invitation, Marlene. Thank you all for coming. You'll probably hear a few points of intersection with Alex's talk. I think we'll hit on some of the same notes. I may take it in slightly different directions. I should say, in contrast to Alex's talk, this is, what I'm presenting is the beginning of a 3-year project rather than a culmination. I welcome your feedback, your thoughts. The focus that I'd like to look at today is one aspect of a larger project on soft power. I want to look at presidential transitions. And by presidential transitions, I mean not just presidential transitions in Central Asia, but also presidential transitions here in the United States. I should say that this is only one aspect. There's lots of other aspects that shape U.S. soft power. So I am kind of loading the deck, and I fully acknowledge that. I'm also mindful of the fact that there's a lot currently that's in play, including the main instrument of U.S. soft power, at least traditionally, which has been departments like the State Department, USAID. It's uncertain now what role these institutions will be playing in the future of U.S. engagement with Central Asia. So there's a lot up in the air here. Let me begin by defining what I mean by soft power. It's social science jargon, so let's put some legs on this. The operating definition that I would like to work with is the ability of governments or leaders to shape, and this is important, without the use of coercion. So this is why we get soft power, right? The ability of governments or leaders to shape, without the use of coercion, the preferences of other states, leaders, and polities. So I'm including society in here. I will bring in society a little bit more than Alex did. That said, I also am a bit more balanced in the elite direction here, but society's going to come into this discussion. And I want to advance 2 conclusions. First is that Central Asian presidential transitions do indeed have an impact on U.S. soft power. And of course, the U.S. Presidential transition is going to have an impact on U.S. soft power in Central Asia. Let me flesh this out a little bit before I take a deeper dive. The first conclusion, what I'd like to suggest today is that the ability of the United States to exert soft power in Central Asia is actually greatest in Kazakhstan. Of all the countries, it's greatest in Kazakhstan. It is what I would say diminished in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. And this may be surprising, I would say it's all but absent in Kyrgyzstan. All but absent in Kyrgyzstan. I'll lay out the logic for why I think this is the case. And then, regarding the second conclusion, I think here in Washington we like to make a lot of the differences in ideology between the outgoing Obama administration and the incoming Trump administration. And I would suggest that has nothing to do with why U.S. soft power in Central Asia may change in the coming years. Rather, what's most important is U.S. geopolitical interests in Central Asia have fundamentally changed. The geopolitical situation that Obama inherited from the Trump administration ensured one of continuity in the way the United States engaged Central Asia. The geopolitical situation today, with the transition between Obama and Trump, is markedly different. The drawdown in Afghanistan. So it's actually geopolitical interest rather than any ideological interest that may be shaping how the United States tries to exert soft power in Central Asia. All right, let me dive into the cases. And I'm going to divide the cases, as I suggested, into Kyrgyzstan as one separate case, Kazakhstan as another separate case, and then I'll combine together Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Throughout the presentation, I'll be referencing 3 key variables, things that I think may be shaping U.S. soft power in Central Asia. One's Russian media. That's a relative constant all the way through. This is, so I teach Government 500, which is a research methods class tonight. I should have much more variation going on here than I do, and my students would probably be upset with me. But this is a constant across all the cases. Russian media presence is very high. even though it's a constant, I think it's still worth discussing. Empowered society, this varies across the three cases, the three typologies here, and the presence or absence of an aging autocrat also varies. And what I'm going to argue is that the combination, the interaction of all three of these leads to variations in the receptivity to U.S. soft power in these three typologies of countries in Central Asia. Let me begin with Kyrgyzstan. First, Kyrgyzstan is the only country in Central Asia where you have institutionalized presidential succession. The only country where you have an actual institutionalized mechanism for selecting the next executive. I am fairly confident, if not entirely confident, that in November 2017 there will be a presidential election in Kyrgyzstan, and the current president, Atambayev, will no longer be president. We can take bets, but I would bet that he will actually leave office, as did his predecessor, Rosa Atambayeva. And what I think is fascinating about the Kyrgyz case is it was these extra constitutional measures taken by Kyrgyz society that led to the institutionalization, the constitutional institutionalization of executive transfer of power. So in 2005, mobs chased Akayev out of power. In 2010, mobs chased Bakiyev out of power. And as a result of this, we now see this institutionalization of executive transfer of power. What does this mean, though? What does this mean if you have an empowered society? Well, in addition to the fact that you have institutionalized transfers of power, the executives in these countries have to be deferential to society. If someone wants to be elected president, you actually have to pay attention to what domestic politics is, or what the population is saying. This doesn't exist really anywhere else in Central Asia, just in Kyrgyzstan. And what is domestic Central Asian politics? What are people asking for? Well, I think what's instructive is if you look at the 2011 presidential election, right after the horrible violence in southern Kyrgyzstan, the ethnic violence, there was a nationwide discussion about Kyrgyz nationalism. Who was at fault for committing the violence in southern Kyrgyzstan? Was it the Kyrgyz who were disproportionately committing the violence? Were the Uzbeks disproportionately affected by the violence? I think most of us in this room know the answer to that. In fact, I think most of Kyrgyz politicians knew the answer to that. But you did not hear any Kyrgyz politicians willingly acknowledge, there's shades here, but most Kyrgyz politicians ran away from this issue, if not fully embracing Kyrgyz ethno-nationalism. Kyrgyz politicians have to be deferential to the Kyrgyz population. They have to listen to domestic, and as we'll suggest in a second, not necessarily international. I think a question which naturally arises from this dynamic is, how does this shape the receptivity to soft power? Are other countries besides the United States potentially limited because the executives are so deferential to the local population, to the demands of the local population? I would say actually in the case of China, Turkey, and Iran, I think this is indeed a limit on the soft power that these countries can exert in Kyrgyzstan. In the case of Russia, though, I think it's different. And it's different precisely because of Russia's media presence in the Kyrgyz press. A few statistics that give you some understanding of the potential effects of the Russian media presence. 88% of respondents in a 2015 survey that Ted Gerber conducted said that Russia was an ally of Kyrgyzstan. 88%. United States, 18% of respondents said that the United States was an ally. You can question the hypothesis if indeed it is Russia's presence in the Kyrgyz media that is leading to this greater favorability of Russia. And this is actually one of the things that Marlene and I over the next 3 years are going to be looking into, if behind these correlations we actually see some kind of causal relationship with the Russian media presence. But let me give you one story to paint the picture which I think is happening. There was the great 2015 embassy package or embassy delivery kerfuffle in Kyrgyzstan. Some of you may remember this. In April 2015, the United States Embassy received 152 metric tons through an air transport And immediately the Russian press picked this up, so Russia 24, state-run television, ran a story drawing parallels between a 2013 shipment to Ukraine and apparently $60 million in small bills that were delivered to protesters that was in this shipment. So they're saying that this shipment, this diplomatic post shipment to Ukraine by the U.S. Embassy was actually money that was being distributed to Maidan, to the protesters in Ukraine. And they didn't come out and actually say that this was what was going on in Kyrgyzstan, but they drew the parallel, leading people to believe that maybe the same thing was happening in Kyrgyzstan. That same day, Jelnomora, a Kyrgyz paper, picked up this same story and suggested, yeah, it may have been money, but they also added, it also could have been, quote, espionage equipment for the massive basement of the new U.S. Embassy. So you see a narrative being constructed, a narrative which begins in Russia, or may simultaneously begin in Russia and in Kyrgyzstan, and is spreading information, potentially disinformation, I didn't look into these shipments, about the United States. And it's not just things like this, you see this again and again. So if you follow the Kyrgyz press, there were lots of stories about how the United States was using LGBTQ rights, championing of these rights, as a way to undermine traditional Kyrgyz culture. There's been several stories about how the United States pushing of ethnic minority rights, particularly Uzbek rights, in the wake of the 2010 riots was a means to enfeeble Kyrgyz nationalism. And then something that Noah Tucker's written a lot about, how U.S. support, or U.S. is potentially supporting ISIS, and this is a way to destroy Central Asian Islam from within. This intersection of Russian media potentially shaping domestic public opinion, I would argue, is making it much more difficult for the U.S. to exert soft power. And at the same time, Russia is creating an environment where Kyrgyz may be susceptible or receptive to Russian soft power. Okay, let me run through the other cases. The Kazakh case, and this is the one that I said is the case that is most susceptible to U.S. soft power, or most receptive, I should say. The logic here is that, yes, you have the Russian media. One thing you don't have is empowered society. And even we do see economic protests in Kazakhstan. John Zen is a good example of that. But these are protests that are relatively easy to deal with. I would say, actually, the biggest challenge that Nazarbayev faces is himself. He is old. And as you get older, it becomes much more difficult, I think, for these autocrats to hold on to power. I've talked about this elsewhere. But at the same time, it's not easy to let go of power. And you can imagine why. And I think actually Alex laid out exactly the reasons why it may be hard for Nazarbayev to let go of power. There's a lot of suspicion about what he has, he and his inner circle have done. If he retires, he could face corruption charges, certainly human rights violation charges, and people just don't like to give up power as well. So I think there's lots of reasons why he wants to stay on, but at the same time, staying on is not easy. As you get older, the potential for elite defection goes up. Even raising the issue of succession sends the country into a frenzy. And we saw this a couple of months ago when Nazarbayev convened a last-minute press conference, and the whole country was ripe with rumors that he was going to say something. And of course, he didn't say anything, right? So you can't do this. What you need is some kind of backstop. And what I'm arguing here is that external powers can provide this backstop. Russia can provide this backstop, and maybe to a lesser extent the United States can provide this backstop. So you see aging autocrats, and I would actually argue in the Krymov case, I don't have time right now, but in the Krymov case you actually saw greater receptivity to the United States in the later years of Krymov. But let me just give you a couple of examples. I think I've got 2 minutes. Sorry.
2.5.
2.5 minutes, okay. Recent meeting between Nazarbayev and Putin in Sochi, discussing Crimea, right? And so Nazarbayev says, quote, all these issues are certainly a burden for Russia, but they can be resolved. Crises come and go, Kazakhstani-Russian relations remain stable, right? So this is signaling that we're going to remain close to Russia, despite what's going on in Crimea. And then maybe not as stark as the comment about Putin, with this interchange with Putin, but if you were watching the 24 elections on CNN, the Tuesday reporting, there's a 30-second spot run on the desirability of investing in Kazakhstan. And there's lots of, you see the glossy ads in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Kazakhstan is trying to reach out and normalize itself with the Western world as well. And I think this is all an effort to shore up his position, both domestically and internationally. Aligning yourself with Putin, I think, says to people who might defect in Kazakhstan, look, if you got the Kremlin behind you, you might want to think twice. If Nazarbayev has the Kremlin behind him, you might want to think twice before defecting from Nazarbayev. So because of this age dynamic, I think it's much more likely that Nazarbayev would be susceptible to soft power, both from Russia and the United States. Lastly, let me just briefly address, in closing here, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. I'll just point to a couple things. One, you don't have aging autocrats. They're relatively young. I think the oldest is 64, Rahman. So they have a long timeline. They don't have an empowered society. Yes, there's a large Russian media presence, but these guys really don't have to listen to society, and they don't have to worry about being kicked out or dying just yet. So I think they can more or less do what they want. They don't need the international backstop, and they don't need to be deferential to public opinion. Last point here, the US presidential transition. This is a dynamic that I think everybody understands. In orange here, you see major US troop presidents in Afghanistan. Really what I should have another graph showing the troop levels. I'll get there eventually. But the big difference is you have continuity between Bush and Obama. You don't have this continuity now between Bush and between Obama and Trump. The geopolitical interest of the United States in Central Asia has declined. And I think Andrei Grozin had a great quote, and maybe I'll leave it with this. He said of the U.S. president's view towards Central Asia, the Central Asian president's view towards the United States, the fact that the administration of the American President Donald Trump has not yet worked out a clear-cut approach either to Russia or Central Asia makes all the regional leaders nervous. They don't know what's going to happen. The land has changed, geopolitically no longer important. And so I think the Central Asian leaders, although initially receptive to Trump's election, I think are getting increasingly nervous. So two main points, U.S. disengagement from Afghanistan suggests that U.S. soft powers and efforts in Central Asia will probably diminish. And then if the United States does pursue soft power efforts, it's going to vary according to those domestic determinants that I've laid out, the age of the autocrats, and whether or not they face domestic pressure. Thank you very much.